What's the hardest thing for you to comprehend about the American culture? How casual debt is. How easy it is to take loans and credit cards out in other people's names without their knowledge. That's why I recommend Bad Credit, the new awesome product that makes your information useless to everyone, including you, having 2 weeks vacation or no 2 for most. In my current country, you have to take 2 weeks of mandatory leave in a row. Including public holidays, I get about 7 weeks vacation a year edit. This got way more attention than I expected. Reading through everyone's comments, it seems there is a huge gap between those with no to little toe and those that get a decent amount. All of this is from the goodwill of the companies you work for and not any federally mandated leave. Where? Super rich televangelists like this Kenneth Copeland I learned about on Reddit. I'm American and trust me, most of us are aware that these dudes are scumbags. I grew up with parents who followed and sent money to him and the likes of him. They teach that if you give your money to the church and to them, God will bless you with prosperity and you'll be rich. 43 years later, my dad is still poor, still gives 10 of his money. My mom was listening to Kenneth and Gloria Copeland's healing teaching recordings as she died from cancer. Canadian here on spring break in Florida. I can't get over the baseline. I don't know how to say it. Baseline education level. There are smart people, but there are also completely uneducated people. Like, the divide is massive. Real reason, no child left behind. Instead of reforming the obsolete Cold War era economic educational system or bringing low educational requirement manufacturing jobs back to the US from China, thank you Reagan-Nixon, thank you Reagan-Nixon, Carter, etc., the government decided everyone needed a college degree and to eat each other alive for the tiny amount of living wage jobs that might exist in the future, which never came to be. Turns out the notion of America doesn't need factories. We can export ideas doesn't exactly employ entire towns like a factory camp. Who knew? So in order to grease the high school to college debt pipeline, the government brought in No Child Left Behind. Instead of reforming the system, it lowered standards, made federal funding fixed to test scores, killed teacher authority, embraced zero tolerance policies, and ensured that even hungry, tired, mentally ill teens could achieve a now worthless diploma. It was trickle-down education, because why let a good chance for create debt slaves go to waste? When I was in school, we were told the truth. We had 5 options for the future. 1. Join the military and get ready for Iraq 2. Accept college debt and gamble on the future. 3. Sell meth. 4. Be homeless. 5. Suicide. But hey, fuckers choosing to be born non-rich. Better luck next cycle, teachers protested. But the state government's response was get back to work or get a real job comic. Public schools have gotten so bad that teachers have a saying, kids don't drop out of high school. They drop out of 2nd grade and hang around for 10 years. Now across the US, we have conservative parent groups demanding a say on what the public school teaches, which amounts to censoring history, science, and bringing religion into schools. We have special needs kids in regular classes with a ratio of 30 kids to a teacher, if they have a teacher at all. Some dystocites are so desperate they are hiring permanent substitutes. Our science teacher did not believe in human evolution. Edit. Thank you for the blah blah. Go register to vote. Voting is free. Registering is free. It's easy and fast. Vote in the primaries. If you can vote in the primaries for both parties, do so. Research your candidates and vote often. Entering America from Canada is strange. Immediately I see billboards about abortion and religion. Beth, I thought it was weird as hell that the Canadian side of Niagara Falls feels like a Vegas knockoff and the US side feels like an actual natural park. School mascots. Where I live, we just have teams and just play matches against people. In America, it's all like, go Easttown Eagles, Ooga Chaka, and there would be some person in a cheapo eagle suit spinning a basketball on his fingers or something. You would have a full dramatic cheerleader dance off before your match. We just shake hands and stare at each other. Sometimes mascots aren't even animals. My school's was a comet. Comet Man was terrifying. Americans. Oh, you're a sports team, all right. Just not a Super One Europeans.
Oh yeah. What's the difference? Americans. Presentation. Welcome to the jungle bled.
It's called Razzle Dazzle. You're welcome. Entree means main course. In the 19th century, when French terms entered the US, The word entree meant the meal between fish and roast. This usually composed of a lighter meat like lobster or chicken. When America entered the 20th century, they cut out the hardier meals like roast and made lighter meats the focus of the meal. The word entree carried on to mean the focus of a meal to this day. In Europe, entree kept its origin of being the beginning of the real meal. America kept the word's place in a meal, while Europe kept the word's actual French meaning. I had it the other way around. When I went to Europe, I asked for entree menu thinking it would be the main course, and ended up eating only a small plate of tomatoes and raw Spanish ham for dinner because I was too embarrassed to explain that I misunderstood what entree meant. I'm really skinny, so the waiters probably didn't correct me because they thought I only needed appetizer-sized dinner loaves. Americans love French fries, cheese and gravy, but poutine never took off south of the border. Always found that odd. Well, yeah, we have chili cheese fries. It's pretty popular in Maine, but we're pretty much Canada anyway. It's because we like cheese, but cheese curds are a bit of a novelty that only really got going outside of the upper Midwest and New England in the past 10 years or so. Zero tolerance rule. Who came up with that shit? The victim is the one who is fucked. Either he gets bullied or he gets a penalty for defending himself. That's why, if someone attacks you at school, you fight back as hard as possible. If you are getting punished anyway, you might as well earn it. My school had this. If someone was getting bullied and they fought back in defense, both parties would get suspended and or expelled. So it wasn't uncommon for the victim to think if I'm getting in trouble regardless, I'm going to make it worth my while, and proceed to go all out and cause serious harm, as much deserved as it is, to their bully. Oh, that was so schools don't have to do shit about bullying, edit. Lotta replies explaining to me that it's so schools don't have liability. I know that. That stops them from doing shit. I feel like it actually makes things worse. Instead of encouraging someone to defend themselves or just try to run away, all of a sudden, it's, well, I'm getting in trouble either way. Guess I better slam this motherfucker's head into the wall. Zero tolerance is getting less popular, but only because schools that use it are getting sued more frequently for it. You see, many of our lawmakers were themselves bullies. Zero tolerance also means the same punishment for bringing ibuprofen to school that they'd give you for bringing illegal drugs to school. A lot of people follow and worship politicians like their gods, flags and all that shit. In the UK, it's universally acknowledged that we hate all politicians pretty much equally. I think this really started to change around the time reality TV became a thing. Now, our entire political process is reality TV. I say this as someone old enough to remember when pretty much every person in Washington was a serious person. Having to tip almost everywhere. It definitely makes sense at some places, but feel like we have to tip at the most random of places these days. It's so fucking weird. I was in a souvenir shop the other day where no real service was given. It wasn't even a restaurant. I was literally buying some scented candle or some shit, and sure enough, the lady flipped the screen around for me to sign, and there was an automatic 25 tip added. I had to deselect it to move forward and complete the transaction. I go to the corner store regularly, and they added a tip option a few months ago. They hired a new person there after they got tips, and she would keep the debit machine under the counter and then pass it up. I only realized after leaving the store the tip option wasn't on the machine, and the regular things I buy cost like $3 more than usually. The next day she was there again. I paid attention and called her out. She said that the machine with the tip option was broken, but she was handing me the same machine that usually has the top option. I left my stuff on the counter and started walking out, and she chased after me and said she would give me a receipt. Again, no tip option, but the price lowered, so I knew what she was doing. My brother's girlfriend also works there, so I brought it up with her and she told the manager. They looked into it, and she had been doing it to every single order over $50, so no one would notice. She was making like $250 a night scamming people. It drives me insane, and my kids think I'm a major boomer when, almost everywhere you go, they present you with the opportunity to tip, like there's no service being rendered other than what you're paying for, and they still flip the screen around and ask if you want to pay a 10 or 15 or a 20. Tippin' there are multiple steps involved. If you want to click no tip. I went to see Aurora last year. I got a t-shirt. Tell me why the meat vendor turns the little payment screen around, the whole interaction less than 15 seconds, to grab the shirt, and it asks for a tip. She stared me down while I pressed no. Every concert I've gone to asks for tips, now for merch. There's a diner I go to where the cashier always asks, would you like to leave a tip? Every time I'm paying for my to-go order, I always have to say no thanks with an audience of customers around me. It makes me so uncomfortable, but I'm not going to tip when I'm just picking up my food. Edit. I just want to make clear that I'm describing the existing tipping culture in the US, and this is not an invitation for you all to try and argue about it with me. Tipping is for service jobs where the worker personally serves you in a way that is mutually exclusive. Their service to you comes at the opportunity cost of doing it for someone else. You aren't expected to tip any random cashier. You tip people who do personal service. Wait staff at the restaurant, your taxi driver, your hairdresser, your masseuse. They get tips. The recent trend of every business asking you to add a tip whenever you swipe your credit card is bogus and should be ignored. That's not a traditional part of American tipping culture. That's just businesses being greedy, lazy, and stupid. Whenever it asks me to tip on a card swiper, I say no. I only tip when it's a restaurant with waiters because they don't get paid enough. I speak as a Latin American. Just setting that down on the table, I don't get why people think that using something from my culture or showing interest of Latin culture is culture appropriation. I've spoken to a lot of people in my culture about this thing, and we all think it's alright. P.S. If you think like this, I would like to talk about it and understand where it comes from, not that I just simply don't understand it. I recall some time ago some ladies from Oregon went to Mexico and learned how to make tacos from this Mexican grandmother. They took the knowledge she taught them and opened a restaurant in Oregon, and people were up in arms about cultural appropriation, and I could never quite square that cultural appropriation, and I could never quite square that. They act like they went there, broke into her house, stole the recipe, and started selling them down the street. Edit. Memory is a fickle thing. I had some of the facts wrong hatsus. 2017, 5/2017, 26 cultural appropriation, Portland, Baritution. I think people get cultural appropriation and cultural appreciation confused way too often. Your healthcare system, so complicated and expensive, and people going bankrupt because they get sick. What bullshittery is this? I have so many bills right now, and they are all medical. Was diagnosed recently with early onset dementia and can't afford to see the doctor until I can afford it. In the meantime, I can't work or barely drive. What am I supposed to do? Hearing the bald eagle screech every time I unwrap a slice of American cheese. American here, fun fact, that stereotypical screech you commonly hear associated with the bald eagle is actually a red-tailed hawk. Bald eagles do not make that sound. They make more of a weird way, less cool, chirping sound. I was too old when I learned this for the first time. Why they don't include tax in the total price of something. Just include it and make life easier. I don't want to have to do maths every time I go there and buy something. Make life easier as a general rule in America. The choice between make life easier or whatever businesses want. Our government is likely to choose the latter. You are allowed to drive a car at 16, own guns and sign up for the military at 18. But alcohol, behold the devil's liquid, is only for 21. Actually, you can join the military at 17. There's a political history behind the drinking age. It used to be 18, not all that long ago. America was the first massive interstate highway system with everyone in the middle class owning a vehicle. The drunk driving fatalities were astronomical compared to the rest of the world. A political group, Mothers Against Drunk Driving Mad, brought the actual statistics before Congress. The solution was to raise the drinking age. It did have effects that were positive, so the law stayed. Many lives were saved. Edit. Yeah, I get it, guys. You have other points of view. Keep in mind the timeline and the wealth of the American middle class. Stop getting into tizzies about it. They had a lot of cars and a yes-drinking culture. Who doesn't know MAD was a grassroots movement and took years to gain traction. MAD said it themselves, they are trying to save their children. Go read about it. Concerned parents, not evil anything. Just sad moms. Lobbying. Legal bribery. What the hell? Also, why do you have to do your taxes? If the government, in the end, knows if what you paid was what you actually owed, why not just tell you? Funnily enough, both your points are related. There are many things that could be done to make filing taxes much easier, but big companies like a Block who make their money from doing people's taxes for them have lobbied the government for decades to keep it so complex. The tax part is actually because of lobbying. All the companies offering to do your taxes for you for a small fee are actively lobbying to keep the system in place for their own economic benefit. Private health insurance that is tied to your employment and sucks, and yet 50s of the population vehemently defend. It's so stupid. Yes, I'll happily pay $200 of my paycheck for private insurance that covers nothing and I can't use. Wait, they'll raise our taxes. Wait, they'll raise our taxes or allocate different uses in my current tax expenditure. I'll pay $30 more in taxes for healthcare. What kind of communism is this bullshit? I hate it. I ate it. I already pay damn close to $100 a month in Medicare I can't even use. But people call it heresy to have some kind of government healthcare system for everyone. I'm no expert, but I almost guarantee that an option for government healthcare taken out in taxes each paycheck will be substantially less than private insurance. And hell, just make it an option. If you wanna opt out and keep private, cool. Now private is competing with cheap government healthcare. It makes me so damn mad, Lamaya. Hey, thanks for working for us for 10 years. Here's 10 cents of extra pay. How dental and eye care isn't included in health insurance. Same in the Netherlands, they're under an add-on package. That's hardly an American thing, though. You Americans seem to have both the smartest and the stupidest humans on Earth coexisting in your country. I think that happens everywhere. We are just louder than other countries in the media sphere. It's a big place. Statistically, we were bound to have some big winners and some big losers in the brain department. I think a good generalization that encompasses this idea is that we are definitely a nation of extremes and extremists. Hell, some of the first colonists in the 13 colonies, Puritans, were dyed in wool religious extremists. People don't tend to leave their homes to immigrate somewhere, especially when an ocean crossing can take weeks on a shitty ship if things are going well. Basically, our country is largely made up from the descendants of desperate nutcases. Edit. This comment is not meant to be taken as a nuanced perspective of the complex history of the colonies that would eventually become the United States. I love my country, and poking fun at how unhinged we can be is just a good time. Welcome to America. Muddy, Duddy, Yai, D. It is nice because it naturally sorts itself in a list. But for most purposes, the year is the least important aspect, so we don't want to see it first. Edited. I changed Yam to Yai, men, because all the isodweebs were after me. I wasn't really focusing on the separators. I was simply trying to comment on the sortability of IMD. But yes, the hyphens are friendly to file systems. Edit 2. Stop suggesting that die-de-maillet is also naturally sortable. It is not. You would get a list with a whole bunch of one at the beginning that cycles through every month of every year before clicking over to 2. If you're rich, you get all the help and preference you could ever need, but if you're struggling or poor, then fuck you, and you don't deserve a single thing. Just work harder. It's as backwards as can be. Having to go back to work 6 weeks after having a baby. It's almost criminal to expect that, but so many women have to. Thankful to live in Canada for that reason. How there is no federal guarantee for things like tow, sick leave, and paid maternity leave. Edit. I am from the USA. As far as I can find, no state guarantees it either. There are laws on if vacation is offered and regulations surrounding that, but no state says you must offer a minimum amount of tow. Edit 2. By tow I mean paid vacation. There are several states with requirements for sick leave. My company refers to tow and sick leave. My company refers to tow and sick leave separately, and I did not make that distinction. Rich people don't need these things and don't want to give them to those who do. Rich people control the government by proxy. Sue. Living to work. Tipping being for some reason seen as mandatory, to the extent that people say, if you can't afford to tip 10 or more, then you shouldn't even go out. Edit. People assuming for some reason that I'm American. No idea why I would be writing this comment if I was American. I'm not, and that's why your culture that expects customers to pay waiters instead of the restaurants paying them properly is utterly fucking insane to me. Edit. Learned from this comment that in much of America, servers do not get the minimum wage and literally rely on tips to afford food and housing. This is news to me, and I'll be a lot more considerate of American servers now that I know. I had assumed that it was like most countries, where the waiters are paid a standard wage and get tips as a bonus, which is why I felt that it was entitled to expect a large tip from every customer. So my new answer to the original question is I can't comprehend how American servers are paid well under minimum wage, and it's treated as normal. Restaurants are allowed to pay their staff under minimum wage under the assumption that tips make up for it. Changing the laws to outlaw that would be a significant step in eliminating tipping culture. How you find the word cunt so offensive? This one is funny to me. When I, American, studied abroad in college, I was hanging out with an Australian girl and several American girls, and the Aussie said something like "I love you cunts" or something. I'd had a little exposure to it being used positively in other English-speaking countries, so I wasn't immediately offended, but most of the rest were. We quickly sorted it out, and it was just a funny experience of studying abroad and people having different cultural norms. Why do we have to work so much all the time? For me, as a resident of Russia, the following is very strange and incomprehensible. Walking in shoes at home, eating large meals in restaurants and stores, an overly consumerist lifestyle, saying hello even to strangers and complimenting them. We rarely do this. We are often shy. Guys, I have nothing against Americans. You are great people. Eating large meals in restaurants. What's restaurant culture like in Russia? Do you go more for the vibes than the food? As a general rule, it's how fucking lovely Americans are. There's more of a culture of being effortlessly welcoming than I've seen elsewhere. I emigrated and have never had an ounce of hate. It's been the opposite. People will be nice, won't cross the line when it comes to banter, are really careful not to offend, and will offer you their spare room when you visit. And it's all done with a confident, optimistic smile. Edit. And now some gold. Thanks, mate. Yep, we're one of 4 things. Passively welcoming, aggressively unwelcoming, or passively unwelcoming. Most of us are passively welcoming, I hope. As an American, I don't get why we make basic medical assistance medication paywall. Water. Why are Americans so weird about water? I've lived here for 20 years, and it still makes no sense to me. So many people will drink Coke or juice or Gatorade all day, and if they do drink water, it needs to be ice cold or flavored with Mio or some shit. Like, just drink the fucking water. I've heard people say, "Oh, I don't like water." The fuck do you mean? Do you also not like breathing air? Do you breathe in Febreze all day? As the only one in the family who drinks water consistently, it's a sugar addiction. Nothing more, nothing less. As far as why we prefer cold water, if you look into it, cold drinks in general suppress taste receptors. So if you have poor quality water, which pre-20th century most of us did, it's going to taste better the colder you can get it. Eventually, it just became a cultural preference. Out here in Arizona, every one of my friends carries around a 40-oz hydro flask with plain water, wondering where you live where people don't drink water. As somebody who went from soda all day to 2 waters, at least for every soda, and even then keep drinking water, it's because it's given to you as a little kid as a reward or to soothe a bad day. So you keep drinking it as you get older, because that's what makes bad days suck less. I think if you don't keep it in the house when you're raising your kid, you're less likely to have them constantly wanting for it. That's funny because my experience has been the opposite. I, American, drink about a gallon of water a day, while living in cheap people drank so little water, and if they did, it was flavored or sparkling. I couldn't believe how people could function on so little water. I know ice water is a pretty American thing, but where are you from? In my experience, Americans drink way more water, iced or not, than elsewhere. When I was in Europe last year, I was dehydrated the entire time because you can't find public drinking fountains anywhere, and then you pay for a bottle of water. Americans basically have access to unlimited drinking water completely, for free, at restaurants. American here, I still don't understand why we can't just try something outside Republican or Democrat. Everyone always acts like the 2-party system is great, but nobody is ever happy with the results. Edit. Rip in box. Thank you everyone for your interactions. Everyone always acts like the two-party system is great. See, this is the weird part. Nobody acts like it's great. There is broad agreement that it is terrible, but it continues. It's because of our first past, the post-Whatâ winner takes all election system. This cheap beat grey video explains it pretty well. The voting system we use makes it virtually impossible for a third option to do well. Then even if a third option did well, you eventually revert back to two parties. Let's use candy as an example. Say you have people deciding between Starbursts and Met. That's how it's been. You have chewy, fruity candy versus crisp candy-coated chocolate, and vote to vote it seems to flip back and forth between the two. There is a section of voters that feel very strongly about chocolate or no chocolate, but enough in between that the winner changes. One day someone says, "Hey, I like the shape of Mems, but prefer fruity candy, so let's have Skittles instead." This is a novel new idea, and you get a bunch of the Starburst voters and some of the Menem voters to peel off, and they manage to win. Now it's time to vote again. The voters that really want chocolate are never going to change from Mems, but the voters that definitely don't want chocolate have a problem here. Maybe they really prefer Starbursts. But last vote Skittles won and Starburst didn't do so well. If they vote Starburst as this time, and some of the Skittle voters from last time switch back to Mems, they might be stuck with chocolate. So ultimately, it's in their interest to vote for the most likely candy to win that they are oak with, instead of the one they actually prefer. In a way, they are voting against Miss more than they are voting against Weismans, more than they are voting for anything else.